All right, yes. Thanks and good morning, and welcome to the second session for today. Can you please show your hands who attended last year's adaptTo? Okay. Who didn't attend? Okay. Who's not sure? All right. So at least for those who were there last year and the year before, usually David talks me into some crazy talk about things. and the last 2 years we did some fun IoT stuff. Some people might remember blinking lights, me walking around trying to activate some sensor and all these things. And today we have the new hot topic for the year, probably, and we are talking about blockchain. And I guess we can skip the stuff about ourselves because we were already on stage, and I think we can start.
Okay. So, blockchain. Right. Why do we want to use the blockchain? Well, I think this picture says it all. We all want to get filthy rich, right? And all the people who are doing blockchain are getting filthy rich, so they say. Actually, I know quite a lot of people who actually just lost money by doing blockchain stuff, but still, it's kind of the modern gold rush in a way. There are 1,800 different cryptocurrencies last time I looked, and these are running on hundreds of different blockchain implementations. And to be honest, most tech companies are kind of jumping on it, right? It's the bandwagon. You don't want to miss the bandwagon. You want to be active in the blockchain some way or another. So, that's why we came with this fun idea. AEM has to do something with the blockchain as well. Let's look for something interesting to do. So, as many of you probably know, AEM used to be called Communicate. And one of the features of AEM is doing press releases, Communicator Press. So that's a really nice use case for a blockchain because these press releases often have to happen on a specific date, specific time with specific content. And they have to, basically for legal reasons often, be made exactly right at the right moment in time with the right content. So since blockchain is an immutable storage mechanism, it seems to be a really nice fit to record these press releases so that you can prove later on that they actually happened at the right time with the right content. So that's the integration that we started playing with. And well, the first thing we had to do is we had to pick a blockchain. As I said, there's hundreds of implementations. I personally looked at a couple of them. Some of them are, many of them support something like smart contracts or customizable, logic. Many of them are extremely hard to get running. Many of them are written in esoteric languages or very kind of interesting, require interesting skills that you wouldn't normally have. So in the end, we picked a blockchain called Hyperledger Sawtooth. Because one of the main things there was that it is really easy to get running yourself as a developer on Linux. It has an ASL license. It has libraries for Java and JavaScript, which is something that we know, so that helps. It has pretty good documentation. The Hyperledger link is there in case you're interested. So what is the integration that we did? It's pretty simple. Let me just put this here. In AEM, you can publish a page, and you can either do this manually or you can do it on a schedule. But when the page is published, you can get the published resource data and submit that. You basically grab it. You submit that to a validator that is part of Hyperledger, And the other thing that we had was we have a custom AEM doc track transaction processor that understands the data and can validate it. You can say, okay, yeah, this is the right data. You can put it in the blockchain. And then from there on, it's basically submitted to Hyperledger. So a tiny little bit more detail on this. The integration ended up actually being very, very simple. We just wrote an OCI bundle that is running on the author instance, and it registers the replication event listener service. And that service gets the callback when the document is published. And that's where we basically, from there on, we make Hyperledger calls to submit it to the validator. The validator, Hyperledger has a REST API, and it has a couple of different processes. But you submit it to the REST API, which then hands it over to the validator, and the validator then gives it to our custom processor, which we could write in Java as well. OK. So that's kind of what we did. I have a little demo. So let's see if that works. OK. Oh, I guess I have to do this first. Ooh. Right. OK. So what have I got here? Sorry. So I've got here a couple of processes now. They're a little bit small. Doesn't really matter. You don't really need to see what it says. But there's a couple of processes. This thing here is the validator. There is another process for the REST API, and there's another process for our transaction processor. And I also have here a command line interface, which I'll make a little bit bigger, where we can basically actually make command line calls on the blockchain. Additionally, I have two AEM instances. I have an author instance there and a publish instance. So it's pretty standard AEM setup, just local author and publish combination. And I have this this lovely crafted web page in AEM that I'm going to use as my press release. So let's make it a little bit bigger as well. Let's see if that works. There. So, right. So I could probably make this a little bit bigger as well, so you see that something will happen. Let's change the text here, right? So I'm just going to offer this a little bit. I'm going to say, hello, adaptTo, right? Beautiful page. And now I'm going to publish it. Publish. And we'll see that if you looked at something happened there in the corner, basically that was the submission to the blockchain. It received a submission. And now what I can do is I can go in here. Let me just make this even a little bit more bigger. I can look at the last block that was in the blockchain. So that has this long ID. So to block show. And then, OK, then you get a lot more numbers. But somewhere in there, there's this number, which is basically the data. And here you can start to see, well, let me just move it up a little bit. So here's our page. It's captured the HTML of the text in the blockchain, and it also captured the timestamp. You can see that a little bit later. It's all kind of encoded, so you'd have to have a parser to read it out. But you can see that it's there, and it's kind of stored there forever, which is what we wanted to try and do. OK. Carsten, when it comes back.
Right.
Off to you.
Thanks. Yeah, as you can tell, this time and all the last talks we did, usually David is the one who gets totally excited about something like IoT, blockchain, and it's always me saying, oh, well, yeah, why do we have to do that? And funnily, we had invited Andrew to our offices at Adobe, and Andrew is a founder of Coursera, this online course system, and he's also very well known in the machine learning, artificial intelligence scene. And he basically, during the talk, he was asked what he is thinking about blockchain, and he said this, that usually people talk about blockchain and try to make sense about it, but in the end, if they would use the word distributed database, it will make way more sense than talking about blockchain. So I'm the skeptical one, of course, trying to pick holes into the whole thing, and let's see what my opinion about blockchain in the end is. And hopefully you can make up your own opinion and see whether it's useful for you or not. So first of all, blockchain is a public distributed database which is decentralized, and one of the key features of a blockchain is that it's immutable, right? So when you think about the blockchain, you add new data to the chain, and that data has a hash of the previous block in the chain. And this makes it difficult or nearly impossible to immute previous blocks in the chain. It's trustless in the end because it's decentralized. No one really owns the database. It's consensus-based, and I'll get to that in a few slides. And usually it's slow. So I think these are very good features to use if you want to. But more interestingly, I think, are these aspects, the governance. So who in the end is owning the data that is stored in the blockchain? It's decentralized. It's, in the end, everyone owns it or no one. You don't really know. Access control, it depends on the implementation, I guess, is something sometimes a little bit tricky. Is everyone allowed to just push data into the blockchain or add data to the blockchain? Is it controlled in some way? Again, that depends on the implementation. I think the most funny topic I came up with is GDPR, actually, right? You know, this new law in Europe or worldwide in the end, where basically everyone can ask a company or institution that has data about you to delete it. Now, a blockchain is immutable. But even before you can ask someone to delete your data, which might be stored in the blockchain, is the question, who do you ask? There is no real owner. So I think that's in the end, I guess it's impossible to do that. So this will be fun over time to see how that problem will be solved. And the other argument is always that the data that is in the blockchain is auditable and verifiable. So everyone can look at the blockchain and see what is stored in the blockchain. This is in the case of the demo we had here. That's true. You could really see the document that was stored there, the timestamp, all the stuff. So you know what's in there, and everyone can see that. So for public data in the blockchain, that's true. There are, of course, some cases where you don't want to store the actual data in the blockchain. And you might think, OK, I'm just putting a link to the data in there. But obviously, whatever is behind that link can change over time. So that doesn't really help to verify stuff. And then there's often the case that data gets encrypted and put into the blockchain. In that case, that data is only verifiable for the people who have the key to decrypt the data. So that's already, I think, on the edge, because not everyone can now see what is happening there. And I think also interesting is it's always, people say, whatever is put into the blockchain is unchangeable. Well, it's nearly true, I would say. First of all, as I mentioned earlier on, it's based on hashing, right? So the next block in a chain has a hash of the previous block. Now, we all know over time, all these hashing algorithms age. And it's easy to break them or create a the same hash for totally different data. For example, in Adobe, we usually hash PDF documents, and we know that usually every 3 to 5 years we have to rehash the documents because the algorithm that was pretty good back 3-5 years ago is now not really safe anymore. So you have to rehash. But obviously, rehashing in a blockchain doesn't really work either, right? So this will be interesting to see what happens over time if the hashing algorithms and key lengths are really suitable for the future. And if you think of a timeline of forever, then I guess that will not be really realistic. The next thing is, I mean, that's a little bit on the edge, I think, is reinterpretation of data. Imagine that you just store a number in the blockchain, like 5. Today, this means $5. But unless you have more mechanisms around how to interpret how to use that number, no one can prevent you from thinking in 3 years that this is 5 cents. Right. Again, it's a little bit on the edge. It depends on how you describe your data, how you put it in there, but it also depends on how you can control the software that is using the data. And more interesting, I think it's the whole blockchain is consensus-based. It's decentralized, and it can happen that more or less concurrently 2 different blocks are added to the same end of the chain, and then it depends on how many, on consensus on which of the 2 ones is really appended to the chain. So as soon as the majority of servers in the end sees the same value, so 51%, then that is added. And that basically means as soon as you can control 51% or more of the blockchain, you basically have control over the blockchain. And for example, it happened earlier this year, and in May, like one of the cryptocurrencies, I think it was Bitcoin Gold, there exactly happened that some nice guys managed to get more than 51%, and they basically manipulated the blockchain in a way that they could sell their Bitcoins twice, which is very good for them, but of course, the guys who bought their Bitcoins were not that happy about it. It's really a problem of the blockchain and the concept how it's constructed, that as soon as you have the majority, you control it. And especially for cryptocurrencies, there are some companies in some far countries to the east which manufacture special hardware for specific mining algorithms used for specific cryptocurrencies. So it's a real issue in the end. Finally, use cases. So what are the use cases people usually think a blockchain is good for? Now, first of all, it's distributed database. I could store files in there. Yeah, well, there are already solutions out there since 500 years you could use to store your files. So why do you want to use something new? One interesting aspect of a blockchain is this contract-based thing. So for example, you might think about storing a contract that you bought something from someone else in there. This might be a good idea, but then again, you have to think about, do you really want to have it public in there? Do you want to have it encrypted? If you encrypt it, how do you manage the keys, and all these things? That might get a little bit complicated, and maybe there are other solutions which you can directly use without worrying about these things. Other use cases are supply chain. It's similar to contract-based stuff, digital rights management, all these things. Again, there are already solutions out there. Why do you want to use a new technology for that one? The other thing is a distributed identity, like key management and verifying that the key belongs to that user. Again, public key infrastructure exists for 20 years, something like that, and basically works. But the real problem with that is really exchanging people and making it user-friendly. But the technology itself exists. So again, no real need to use a blockchain. I guess the most interesting use case for blockchain is, or use cases for blockchain are always when it comes to money. And that's why we are experimenting with blockchain, because everyone wants to get rich. But more seriously on this one, for example, there was a discussion some weeks ago about how to monetize several aspects of open source projects, right? So usually you're using an open source project, you want that someone fixes a bug, or you want a new feature. How do you get someone of the committers to do that? Obviously, a good idea is, well, just give someone money to do that. So if you want to have anything in Sling, I'm here, I'm taking money. No, seriously. Right? So this is one way of getting something in, creating an incentive for someone. And this is where blockchain might make sense. So basically, it's again a contract-based thing. Someone wants a patch, submits an entry to the blockchain. I want to have this stuff fixed, and in that open source project, and you get whatever money for that. And then someone of the committers can accept this contract, work on the stuff, and get the money. So things like that, I guess in general, everything which involves money might make sense in a blockchain because it is immutable, at least for the next 2 years. Yes, and that's more or less the use cases I've heard about. And I think in general, this brings us very quickly to the end, I mean, everyone has to think about whether you want to use blockchain or not, right? That's your decision, of course. And a very obvious way to answer that question is first look at your problems and then think about if you want to use blockchain, and not the other way around. Like, I want to use blockchain, and now I'm trying to find a problem for that. That's, I mean, it's really obvious, but it really, if you look at the press releases, and it goes back to the quote from earlier on, some companies really jumped on the blockchain wagon and said, okay, yeah, we are using blockchain as well for whatever, which doesn't really make sense because there are already solutions out there. Right. And this basically is our very quick, rough walkthrough through blockchain and how to have a very good use case for AEM and not how to use blockchain.